This base model Steam Deck is about to get a complete overhaul, taking its storage from 64GB to 2TB. That's more than any store-bought configuration. It'll also receive some new anti-drift thumbsticks and a custom transparent case. The Steam Deck is Valve's handheld Linux-based gaming console that was first released in 2022, having only just arrived in Australia in November of 2024. Before we can take this Steam Deck apart, it'd be a smart idea to image the OS to the new SSD before it's installed. You can re-image the OS, however, you'll lose all the content on the device. To clone the OS, the new drive will need to be installed into a USB-C enclosure, which will allow the drive to be attached to the Steam Deck. Using the power button, we can kick the device out of Steam and into Linux. From here, we essentially have a full Linux desktop environment. To clone the OS, we need to launch the console, because of course we do. It's Linux. I can now connect the drive, and after setting a Linux password, run a command to show me all the connected drives. NVMe 0 and 1 being the internal 64GB drive, which has many different partitions, and SDA being our attached 2TB drive. With one command, I can transfer the entire contents of the internal drive to the new one. That is, of course, assuming I can type the command in without making a mistake. Because pressing the back arrow key doesn't do as I expected, and don't even try pressing the forward arrow because it crashes the console. It's hard to say how many times I had to type this one out before I got it right, but to my credit, the on-screen keyboard is very buggy. But I eventually got there. Before we open the Steam Deck, it's important to remove the SD card to prevent it from getting damaged as we open the case. There's 8 Phillips screws and many plastic clips securing this back panel into place. I'm expecting this device to be very repairable, as the first teardown video of this console was released by Valve, the company behind this device. Name another company doing teardown videos on their own devices before they've even released them. With the back removed, we have our first look inside this Steam Deck. The deck I have here is the second revision. Early production models have a slightly different heat spreader and fan, but are otherwise the same. There's a lot of layers of boards with plenty of flex cables running all over. So we have our work cut out for us, getting all this into a new case. I'll start by removing the heat spreader to reveal the battery connection below. I'll get this disconnected before going any further. The SSD is already accessible at this point, however I'll come back to it later on. The first major part I'll remove is the joysticks. Removing them first prevents the console from moving around while we're taking the remaining parts out. The trigger buttons are to be unclipped next. Working a spudger in between the post and lug on one side, it can be slowly worked free. I'll repeat this process on the other side before I begin removing the main left side control board. The buttons, trackpad and haptic motor connect to this board, so there's quite a bit to detach before it's free, including a flex cable hidden below some tape. In this instance, I don't believe this is some kind of anti-repair tactic. I say this because the trigger positioning sensor is directly above. The tape may be there to prevent the sensor from detecting the white connector, preventing issues with the trigger button, but I don't know for sure. Below the main board is another smaller board secured with 4 screws, and you wouldn't believe it, but there's still more below it, with this piece being the trackpad and haptic motor. As for what this second PCB does, there's nothing on it except some traces. I believe it may be used for detecting a click on the trackpad, sort of like a button. It's now onto the motherboard, where the speakers, 2 antennas and display cable can be unplugged. Then 4 screws can be unfastened. But before the board can be pulled free, there is still one horribly placed flex cable located under the CPU's heat pipe. Once removed, we can take a closer look at the motherboard powering this Steam Deck. While we've seen so many modular components so far in this teardown, one of the most critical is not. The USB-C charge port is soldered directly onto the motherboard, in what seems like a missed opportunity given everything else. The Steam Deck is looking quite bare, but there's still more components that need to come out, including one I've been frankly dreading: the display. Sending what remains of this device over to my heat plate, I can use heat to help soften the adhesive holding the screen in place. I need to be able to unadhere the display without damaging the glass or LCD below. My heart skipped a beat when this happened. I thought I had separated the internal layers of the LCD before I promptly realized it was just a glass screen protector. I could continue slowly working away at the display. There is a fragile ribbon cable that runs along the right side of the display. Damaging it would kill the screen, so I can only work the pick in a few millimeters to prevent damaging it. Eventually, I had the display separated. What remains is the midframe and sensor cable, both of which I will now remove. Additionally, the volume and power buttons can be removed. With that, we've completely disassembled everything from this Steam Deck. There is an astounding amount of pieces and parts within. I've organised each side to its own dedicated magnetic mat, so that this console can go back together in one piece. The bigger question for me is if the display still works after being removed. While I was tasked with installing a custom case to this Steam Deck, I was given two choices. The first, a frosted translucent back and front case with matching buttons and plenty of extra screws. And a purple back casing, which has extra ventilation for the fan and an additional thermal pad. Having completely disassembled the device, we are of course installing the translucent front panel, but we shall see how each of the back panels look once we get the device partially reassembled. Given that the display and joysticks are black in colour, I'll retain the original black buttons to give the device a nice contrast, rather than being all translucent with a black screen. This will also make the buttons stand out and be easily legible. It's important the mid-frame be screwed into place before the display is attached, as 6 of its 10 screws are located under the screen. The new speaker mesh is installed to prevent dust and dirt from entering the speaker and case. Given the nature of this case, it's important to get things as clean and straight as possible, as it'll all be visible. It's time to get the display attached, but before we do so, it needs new adhesive. I tried dry scraping the old adhesive off, but it was proving difficult, so it's back over to my heat plate again to soften the adhesive. While still using my spudger, the adhesive, once heated, was coming off far easier than before. Care was still needed to be taken around the flex cable on the right hand side. But once removed, the new adhesive could be applied to the midframe, first aligning it into place before firmly pressing it down with my spudger. The quality of adhesive can be determined at the next stage. If the protective film can be removed without any of the adhesive lifting off in the process, it has a proper bond. However, if large sections are lifting off, the adhesive is of poor quality or the surface hasn't been cleaned properly. If you're struggling to find good adhesive, liquid glue such as E8000 or B7000 can be used as a replacement. This adhesive appears to be of adequate quality, so I can proceed in installing the display, sliding the right hand side in first to prevent the flex cable from getting pinched by the frame. Then it's just the case of getting all the parts we removed earlier back into place. I've done quite a few of these custom cases to various devices over the years, and the plastic ones typically have poor screw standoffs, which can crack or just be difficult to tighten screws into. This one, however, is really good. The flex cables on this device are somewhat strange. They have little teeth on each side, meaning they need to be plugged in at an angle, as if you were installing RAM. While I was able to remove the flex cable under the heat pipe, reattaching it was another story. The heat pipe really needs to be loosened before you can gain enough clearance. But with the motherboard now in place, it's time for the plethora of buttons to be reinstalled. It's time to get the new joysticks installed. These electromagnetic versions are supposed to not only last longer than the originals, but prevent stick drift, which sounds like a car maneuver, but is actually an issue where the joystick will be constantly depressed on a certain axis, acting as though you're moving it when you're actually not touching it at all. Each joystick has an A and B mode. Before disassembling the console, I made note of the controller ID. Those beginning in MEDA require mode A, while MHDA requires mode B. Once correctly set, they can be installed into the Steam Deck. The time has finally come to upgrade the storage. I'll remove the original 64GB M.2 SATA drive and replace it with a 2TB NVMe, having already transferred the OS earlier. The original drive can then be installed into an enclosure, turning it into a nifty portable 64GB solid-state drive. Connecting the battery, it's time for a test. Pressing the power button, I could hear the Steam Deck fire into life, but nothing appeared on screen. Plugging in the charger, I could hear the dreaded charging sound. And the trackpads were providing me with haptic feedback, meaning the device was on, but the display wasn't working. Contemplating how I could have damaged the screen, it lit up into action and the console started booting. I hadn't broken anything. In fact, it may have had something to do with the console finding and configuring the new drive. Whatever the delay was, the console is working. I'll get the heat spreader installed before we seal up this console, also remembering to attach the joystick's flex cables. As for the back, we have two choices. Purple, which looks alright but doesn't match the faceplate, so I think I'm going to stick with the translucent one. It did come with matching buttons, however to keep on theme I'll need to use black buttons. The originals are plastic welded into place, so I turned to the purple casing where I could unscrew its buttons. But there was an issue. These buttons had different spacings to the originals, so they couldn't be attached to the clear case. So we have to resort to drilling out the plastic welds to salvage the original buttons. This time, things fit perfectly. Once the rear vent was attached, the back was ready to be installed. After first clipping it into place, the 8 screws can then be installed. But I kid you not, the very last screw wouldn't go in. It appears I misplaced one of the heat spreader screws, so I'll need to reopen the device, move the screw to the correct spot, and then reattach the back. And we're done. So this is it, a fully custom Steam Deck with a translucent case, black buttons, anti-drift joysticks, and loads of extra NVMe storage. Overall, the device was very modular, requiring only one type of screwdriver for the complete teardown. What gamers would be looking to replace, like the SSD and joysticks, are very easy to access. The only real negative to this console's repairability being the soldered-on charge port. Overall, I think the console has turned out great, and its owner is pleased with the results. And on that note, this has been a Hugh Jeffries video. If you like what you saw, consider subscribing and check out the custom tech playlist for more videos just like this one. And if you're looking for any used devices, be sure to check out my online store, link for which is down in the description. That's all for this video, and I'll catch you guys next time.